There's a certain kind of silence you only hear when the engine's off and the trail stretches out like a promise. Dust hangs in the air, sunlight slices across the hood, and you can still feel the heartbeat of a machine that was built to claw through the impossible. This isn't about luxury or status. It's about the raw satisfaction of going farther than you should, tackling terrain that laughs at everything else, and realizing the line between control and chaos is razor thin. Somewhere in that silence lies the question every off-road fanatic wrestles with: what happens when engineering bravado meets pure wilderness? Because some vehicles aren't just made to drive. They're made to conquer, to prove something about the people behind the wheel and the brand that built them. So before we dive into the dust and metal and legacy that define this legend, take a second to like, subscribe, and comment which machine you want to see in our next deep dive. The Jeep Gladiator 2020 entered the scene as more than a new truck. It was Jeep's declaration that the brand could fuse its trail-dominating DNA with genuine pickup practicality. After decades of rumors, prototypes, and fan theories, Jeep finally revived the idea of a Wrangler-based truck, and the 2020 Gladiator wasn't a half measure. It carried the unmistakable face of the Wrangler JL, the same open-air freedom with removable doors and roof, and the same 7-slot grille that's been staring down mountains since World War II. But under that familiar skin lay a longer frame, a true steel bed, and the challenge of convincing traditional truck buyers that an icon of adventure could also haul lumber on a weekday. When Jeep began sketching what would become the Gladiator, the market had shifted dramatically. The mid-size pickup segment was roaring back. Trucks like the Tacoma and Colorado had proven there was room for rigs that weren't massive but still capable. Jeep had been absent from that conversation for decades. The last time it tried, with the Comanche in the late 1980s, the brand was still finding its footing under corporate mergers and changing customer expectations. By 2020, the timing was perfect. People wanted practicality with personality, utility with story. Jeep, of all brands, knew how to sell a story. The Gladiator's design team faced an unusual brief. They couldn't just stretch a Wrangler and call it a day. The truck needed real-world strength. That meant a longer wheelbase for stability when towing, revised suspension geometry to handle payload, and careful calibration so that it still felt like a Jeep off-road. The rear frame rails were reinforced, the suspension tuned for weight, and the drive shaft beefed up to handle torque under load. What sounds simple on paper became a balancing act between adventure and utility. Jeep didn't want a truck that drove like a compromise. They wanted a truck that extended the Wrangler's mission without softening it. Inside, the Gladiator struck a delicate tone. The cabin was familiar, almost defiantly so, carrying over the upright dash, exposed fasteners, and washable materials from the Wrangler JL. Yet subtle tweaks, better seat support, improved infotainment, and a slightly quieter cabin acknowledged that pickup owners spend more time on the road. Jeep's engineers added refinement without sanding down the Gladiator's edge. You could still remove the top and doors. You could still fold down the windshield. It remained the only convertible pickup truck in the US. An absurd yet irresistible bragging right that captured the heart of Jeep culture. Under the hood, the Gladiator launched with the proven 3.6-liter Pentastar V6. It wasn't flashy, but it was durable and well-known across the Chrysler lineup. With 285 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque, it wasn't chasing dyno charts. It was built for consistency. Paired with either a 6-speed manual or an 8-speed automatic, it gave drivers choice, something increasingly rare. Later, Jeep would add the 3.0-liter Eco Diesel, giving the Gladiator a torque-rich personality better suited for towing and crawling. In both cases, the powertrain served a clear purpose: reliability first, personality second. Yet what truly defined the Gladiator 2020 wasn't its specs, it was its stance. Jeep didn't shy away from boldness. The truck looked like a Wrangler that had been stretched in the gym and sculpted for war. The squared fenders, pronounced wheel arches, and signature grille formed a profile that was instantly recognizable even under layers of mud. Owners saw it as a badge of belonging. Critics saw it as excessive. Jeep couldn't care less. They knew the Gladiator wasn't for everyone. It was for those who wanted a truck that felt alive. Jeep's challenge was convincing skeptics that a lifestyle vehicle could perform as a real work truck. The Gladiator's 7,650-pound towing capacity and 1,600-pound payload were solid, if not class-leading. What mattered more was how it delivered those numbers. Thanks to its long wheelbase and coil spring suspension, it offered a smoother ride on road than many expected. But it was off-road where the Gladiator earned its stripes. With approach and departure angles rivaling pure trail rigs, solid Dana 44 axles front and rear, and available locking differentials, it proved that a pickup could still be a true Jeep at heart. Owners discovered that driving a Gladiator was less about speed and more about experience. It wasn't the quickest or most efficient truck, but it offered something rare, a sense of connection. Each trip felt deliberate. Every rock crawl or muddy rut reminded you of its lineage. The long wheelbase did change the dynamics on tight trails. It could drag its tail over sharp crests where a two-door Wrangler would dance over. But the trade-off was stability, confidence, and the ability to carry gear for days without compromise. The culture around the Gladiator grew rapidly. Jeep's aftermarket community exploded with lift kits, overlanding setups, snorkels, bumpers, and racks designed to turn it into a personal expedition machine. From Moab to the Mojave, the 2020 Gladiator became a rolling canvas for adventure. Owners weren't just customizing a vehicle, they were broadcasting identity. Jeep, ever savvy, encouraged this with endless Mopar accessories and special editions. Each version, from the base Sport to the Rubicon, offered its own flavor, inviting buyers to pick how much grit or glamour they wanted baked in. As the first new Jeep pickup in nearly 30 years, the Gladiator had the weight of expectation on its shoulders. Some saw it as a resurrection, others as a marketing experiment. Yet in a market where trucks increasingly blurred into crossovers with beds, the Gladiator stood out as unapologetically mechanical. It used a traditional 4x4 system, not an electronically simulated one. It demanded attention, effort, and understanding from its driver. That friction became its charm. It wasn't for those who wanted convenience, it was for those who wanted connection. Culturally, the Gladiator tapped into something distinctly American. It blended nostalgia with utility, echoing the days when trucks were tools but also companions for exploration. In an era where SUVs dominate, the Gladiator reintroduced the idea that a truck could be both personal and practical, fun and functional. It wasn't chasing volume, it was chasing authenticity. The development story of the Jeep Gladiator 2020 is as much about restraint as ambition. Jeep could have built something safer, easier, more mainstream. Instead, they took a risk on character, banking on loyalty and the timeless pull of the trail. That decision would set the tone for how the truck was received and how its identity would evolve against rivals with very different philosophies. And that's where the next part of this story begins, when the Gladiator had to prove itself not just on paper, but in the real world, against machines that measured strength in entirely different ways. The Jeep Gladiator 2020 faced its true test the moment it hit American roads, because the minute a truck wears that badge, expectations come heavy. Buyers didn't just want a mid-size pickup. They wanted the spirit of Jeep, distilled and ready for real work. Yet the world it entered was ruthless. Rivals had decades of refinement behind them, each with its own loyal following. The Toyota Tacoma dominated reliability charts. The Chevrolet Colorado had found its niche with power and comfort. And new entries from other manufacturers chased lifestyle buyers with glossy interiors and tech-heavy appeal. Against that, the Gladiator's mission was clear but risky, to prove that an off-road heart could beat inside a practical, everyday truck body. For Jeep, that meant leaning hard into authenticity. The Gladiator 2020 didn't try to out-luxury anyone or reinvent the wheel. It doubled down on mechanical honesty. And that choice immediately split the market. Enthusiasts adored it for being unapologetically rugged. Casual buyers found it a little too raw. Reviewers praised its off-road dominance, but flagged its long wheelbase as a limitation on tight trails. Yet even critics admitted that nothing else drove quite like it. Behind the wheel, you could feel the lineage of every Wrangler before it, a lineage that valued grip, ground clearance, and stubborn perseverance over comfort. Off the pavement, the Gladiator Rubicon trim became the benchmark. Front and rear locking differentials, an electronic disconnecting sway bar, and 33-inch all-terrain tires made it the most capable stock pickup on sale. Jeep engineers didn't just tune suspension, they engineered attitude. Each articulation over rock or rut was a showcase of design priorities. Where most trucks worried about ride comfort, the Gladiator embraced the terrain. It wanted to crawl, to test its limits, to make its driver part of the process. That hands-on experience became a selling point in itself. Owners described it less as driving and more as partnering with a machine that refused to quit. But capability isn't enough to sell trucks in America. Buyers care about comfort, technology, and value. Jeep knew this, and the Gladiator 2020 didn't ignore it. It just refused to let those features take center stage. The Uconnect infotainment system was one of the best in its class, simple and responsive. While Apple CarPlay and Android Auto brought modern convenience to a cabin otherwise built around hard edges and functional design. Heated seats, adaptive cruise control, and blind spot monitoring softened the rougher edges, making the truck livable day to day. Still, the Gladiator was never going to be a plush commuter. It was designed for those who would rather end a weekend with mud on the fenders than chrome on the grille. The aftermarket scene quickly proved how right Jeep had been to leave room for interpretation. Within months, tuners and fabricators unleashed a flood of parts. Suspension lifts, winches, steel bumpers, and rooftop tents turned the Gladiator into a foundation for anything from mild overlanding rigs to full expedition builds. Enthusiasts treated it like a blank slate, and the aftermarket treated it like a challenge. The truck's modular nature, the removable doors, the easy-access electronics, the simple body-on-frame construction, made customization nearly limitless. This was where the Gladiator shined brightest, not as a finished product, but as an invitation to create. Motorsport brought even more attention. The Gladiator entered events like the Rebel Rally and King of the Hammers, not always to win outright, but to demonstrate endurance and adaptability. In those brutal environments where machinery fails under pressure, the Gladiator's old-school construction proved its worth. Solid axles, often criticized for being dated, suddenly became an advantage, providing articulation and toughness that independent suspension systems couldn't match. Jeep's gamble on traditional design paid off where it mattered most, in the dirt, under strain, when other trucks faltered. Still, the road ahead wasn't perfectly smooth. The Gladiator's longer wheelbase and higher center of gravity made it less nimble on narrow trails compared to the Wrangler. Its price, especially in higher trims, pushed it into full-size truck territory. And while its towing numbers were competitive, some buyers expected more given the price point. Jeep's answer was simple. The Gladiator was about versatility, not one-dimensional performance. It wasn't the best hauler or the most comfortable daily driver, but it was the only mid-size pickup that could drop its top, ford a river, and climb a canyon wall on the same day. In the US, the cultural response to the Gladiator was fascinating. It became a statement vehicle, not just for hardcore off-roaders, but for a new generation of weekend adventurers. Social media feeds filled with Gladiators perched on red rock mesas, camp setups unfolding from truck beds, and rooftop tents silhouetted against sunsets. Jeep had successfully transformed its pickup into a lifestyle emblem. It wasn't about towing boats or hauling drywall. It was about freedom, visual and emotional. Buyers weren't chasing utility as much as identity. In that sense, Jeep's marketing worked brilliantly. Critics in the automotive press, however, maintained divided opinions. Some argued the Gladiator was too expensive and too compromised, a Wrangler with a bed that diluted both forms. Others saw it as the truest expression of Jeep's ethos in decades, a machine that didn't apologize for being different. And in a market obsessed with refinement, difference can be its own kind of power. For Jeep, that power translated into strong initial sales and a loyal fan base that grew with every special edition. When the Gladiator Mojave appeared, tuned for high-speed desert runs, it proved that Jeep was paying attention to the Raptor-style crowd. Yet even then, the brand didn't abandon its core. The Mojave kept solid front axles, something nearly unheard of in trucks aimed at high-speed off-road driving. The decision underscored Jeep's belief that its DNA shouldn't be diluted, even if it meant living outside conventional performance metrics. The broader industry took notice. Other manufacturers started injecting more personality into their mid-sized trucks, realizing that character mattered as much as capability. The Gladiator had reignited conversation about what off-road trucks should be, not just tools but symbols of experience. Jeep had redefined the frontier of adventure vehicles, blurring the line between practicality and passion. As the months rolled on, the Gladiator 2020 carved out a clear identity. It wasn't a volume seller like some of its rivals, but it didn't need to be. It was a flagship of spirit, a proof that an automaker could still take risks in a market dominated by spreadsheets and focus groups. It wasn't about conquering every spec chart. It was about creating an emotional connection strong enough to withstand criticism. The story of the Gladiator in its first years became one of validation. Jeep's faith in its heritage had paid off, even if imperfectly. The truck found its audience, and that audience became advocates. In forums, on trails, and in small towns across the U.S., Gladiator owners shared experiences of cross-country trips, rock-crawling weekends, and daily drives that reminded them why they'd chosen this machine. The Gladiator 2020 wasn't about flawless execution. It was about belonging to something bigger. That sense of belonging is what ultimately turned the Gladiator from a curiosity into a cornerstone of modern Jeep culture. It connected past to present, bringing back memories of the Comanche while pointing toward the future of adventure-focused pickups. And that future, how the Gladiator would evolve, what it would represent beyond its specs, would become the real measure of its success. Because after the buzz faded and the dust settled, one question remained. What legacy would the Gladiator leave, and what lessons would it teach the off-road world moving forward? The Jeep Gladiator 2020 entered its next phase not as a novelty, but as a benchmark for what off-road authenticity could look like in a modern era. From its first full year on sale, it had proven that Jeep could merge heritage with functionality, but now it needed to show endurance, to prove it wasn't just a one-hit revival. The Gladiator had already rekindled the brand's truck lineage, yet its greatest impact was cultural. It changed the conversation about what a pickup could be, redefining expectations not through luxury or technology, but through purpose. Buyers who once dismissed Jeep as a niche off-roader began to see it as a legitimate truck maker, while die-hard Jeep loyalists found pride in something new without feeling betrayed. The Gladiator 2020's legacy grew on trails, highways, and job sites across America. Owners used it to commute, to camp, to climb, sometimes all in one week. The longer people lived with it, the more its identity matured. The quirks became virtues. Its stiff ride became a badge of toughness. Its boxy design, a symbol of confidence in a world of aerodynamic sameness. It reminded drivers of an era when vehicles weren't built to please algorithms or trends, they were built to serve a purpose. And that purpose for the Gladiator was unambiguous. Go anywhere, carry anything, and look like you mean it. That unfiltered mission resonated with the US audience in a way few vehicles manage anymore. By refusing to smooth out its edges, the Gladiator 2020 appealed to authenticity-starved buyers who saw in it a kind of rebellion. It wasn't efficient, quiet, or subtle, but it was real. That sense of mechanical honesty, the feeling of steering something born from a genuine philosophy rather than a marketing meeting, became the truck's most enduring appeal. Jeep had tapped into a national sentiment, the idea that vehicles could still embody freedom in the literal sense, not just as a slogan. As ownership stories spread, the Gladiator began shaping a broader lifestyle movement. Overlanding, once a niche pursuit, exploded in popularity. The truck's combination of open-air capability and bed-mounted storage made it the perfect foundation for self-sustained travel. Social media filled with images of gladiators parked under starlit skies, tents pitched, fires glowing. The truck had transcended its spec sheet. It had become a symbol of escapism. Even those who never took it off-road admired what it represented: possibility. That cultural power is part of the Gladiator 2020's blueprint for longevity. Its influence pushed other automakers to rethink what authenticity means. Some tried to emulate Jeep's aesthetic. Others pursued the adventure market with varying sincerity. But Jeep's advantage was intangible. It wasn't pretending. The Gladiator's DNA wasn't retrofitted for trend. It was inherited. Every bolt and beam carried the shadow of the Wrangler and, before that, the Willys. This direct lineage is what made it feel inevitable rather than manufactured. In retrospect, the Gladiator 2020's imperfections are exactly what preserved its legacy. The long wheelbase that hindered it on tight trails gave it highway stability and towing strength. The upright windshield that hurt aerodynamics provided visibility no modern truck could match. The removable panels that caused extra wind noise also offered unmatched freedom. Jeep didn't compromise, it prioritized. Each so-called flaw told you where its heart was, and enthusiasts respected that. In an era of multi-mode everything, the Gladiator had one mode: unapologetic. That attitude shaped its resale values and collector appeal. Early production models, especially Rubicons with manuals, became sought after, not because they were rare, but because they represented the last of a kind: mechanical, tactile, connected. Future generations of Jeep owners will look back at the Gladiator 2020 as the moment when the brand doubled down on what made it different instead of chasing what made others successful. It was a statement. Jeep doesn't follow, it forges. The Gladiator's engineering philosophy also began influencing how Jeep approached other models. Lessons from its towing dynamics, its frame rigidity, and its user feedback loop directly informed updates to the Wrangler line and future electrified off-roaders. It reminded the company that innovation doesn't always mean reinvention. Sometimes it means refinement through experience. When plug-in hybrids and electric variants eventually joined the family, they carried a bit of the Gladiator's defiance, the idea that adventure and evolution could coexist. For the off-road world, the Gladiator 2020 became a touchstone in how capability is marketed and measured. It reminded everyone that real adventure vehicles aren't defined by 0-60 times or touchscreen size, but by how they make you feel when the pavement ends. Every scratch in its paint, every dented skid plate became a story. It reignited appreciation for vehicles that invite imperfection, the kind you earn through use, not avoid through caution. Today, the Gladiator stands as a bridge between two automotive eras. On one side, the analog past, steel, gears, grease. On the other, the digital future, software, sensors, silence. It doesn't fully belong to either, and that's precisely why it matters. It's proof that there's still room for mechanical sincerity in a world trending toward autonomy. It challenges the notion that progress must mean detachment. In its continuing life cycle, the Gladiator's role extends beyond being a truck. It's a philosophy on wheels. It teaches that adventure doesn't come pre-packaged in features. It's built through choice, risk, and grit. Jeep's decision to revive a pickup after 3 decades wasn't just business, it was belief. And that belief inspired an entire generation of enthusiasts to seek not just capability, but connection. The Jeep Gladiator 2020 endures because it captures something no algorithm can quantify: the human urge to explore. Whether it's crawling over rocks in Utah or hauling a kayak to a lake in Maine, it carries the same promise: a machine that keeps the wild within reach. In an age of efficiency, it celebrates excess in the best possible way: excess of character, excess of heart. And as newer technologies reshape mobility, the Gladiator's legacy will serve as a reminder that sometimes progress means remembering where you started. So when the next evolution of the Jeep Gladiator arrives, whether electric, hybrid, or something else entirely, it will inherit more than a nameplate. It will inherit a legacy forged in trail dust and steel, one that taught us that the value of a vehicle isn't measured only by how far it goes, but by how deeply it connects to the people who drive it. That's the true gift of the Gladiator 2020, and that's the legacy it leaves in every mile yet to come. The Jeep Gladiator 2020 remains one of those rare machines that defines its own era instead of reacting to it. Years after its debut, it continues to draw the kind of loyalty that can't be manufactured, a loyalty earned through purpose, presence, and proof. For US buyers, that legacy means opportunity, but it also means responsibility. Owning a Gladiator 2020 isn't just about having a capable truck. It's about understanding what it represents in an age when fewer vehicles invite you to truly drive. In today's market, the Gladiator holds its value impressively. Used models often command strong prices because demand for real 4x4 hardware hasn't slowed. The Rubicon trim, with its locking differentials and rock-ready geometry, remains the most sought after, though even base sport models deliver the essentials: a stout ladder frame, body-on-frame toughness, and the unmistakable Jeep character. Buyers considering one should pay attention to service history, especially on vehicles that have seen heavy off-road use. Suspension wear, bed corrosion from overlanding gear, and clutch life on manual versions are common points to inspect. Still, most components were designed for durability, and aftermarket support is deep enough to keep parts flowing for decades. Reliability data has been mixed but improving. The Pentastar V6 continues to prove itself nearly bulletproof when maintained, and the Eco Diesel, while more complex, offers incredible torque and long-range efficiency for those willing to keep up with proper servicing. Fuel economy is modest compared to smaller crossovers, but that's never been the point of the Gladiator 2020. It was built for strength, not spreadsheets. Insurance and registration costs fall in line with mid-sized trucks. And for enthusiasts who plan to personalize their rigs, modification options are practically endless. From an ownership experience standpoint, what stands out most is versatility. The Gladiator can serve as a family adventure rig, a work truck, or a toy hauler, depending on how it's outfitted. The removable roof and doors make it a four-season shapeshifter, something no rival can claim. For U.S. residents who explore both coasts and the mountain states, it offers that rare balance between road trip comfort and trail credibility. Few trucks can say they feel at home on both an interstate and a canyon rim. Importantly, the Gladiator 2020 isn't just a nostalgic choice. It remains relevant in a market shifting toward electrification because it represents the emotional core that keeps enthusiasts connected to vehicles. It's a reminder that capability isn't just about sensors or modes, it's about mechanical empathy. The feeling that what happens underfoot is a direct result of your input. Even as electric versions loom, the Gladiator's mechanical honesty gives it staying power. It's not afraid to get dirty, to creak, to show its use. That's part of the charm. For anyone considering buying one today, the advice is simple. Know what you're getting. This is not a commuter dressed up as an adventurer. It's a genuine off-road truck that happens to commute. Maintenance matters, and driving it with respect will make it last indefinitely. It rewards patience, confidence, and curiosity, the same qualities that built its legend. Looking back, the Jeep Gladiator 2020 taught the industry that authenticity sells when it's backed by engineering that works. It brought back a lineage once thought lost and turned it into a living symbol of how tradition can coexist with innovation. Its legacy is already visible in the way automakers talk about adventure, in how trucks are marketed, and in how buyers see themselves behind the wheel. In the end, the Gladiator 2020 story is one of conviction. Jeep didn't chase trends. It trusted its roots. And in doing so, it gave the off-road world a modern icon. A reminder that steel, sweat, and soul still have a place in the future of driving. That's the power of the Gladiator. Not just a truck, but a statement that freedom, when built right, never goes out of style.